Hi, this is Kelsey Fukowski, and in this video we're going to be looking at the role of campaign finance, which is arguably a major issue and topic that is being discussed in politics right now, as money has a major role in many of the elections, whether it's at the state, the local, or even the national level, especially the national level. So let's get into that right now. Really, the big first piece of legislation that came out was the Federal Election Campaign Act, which is sometimes known as FECA, in 1974. And what this does is it's going to bring about the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, part of our bureaucracy, to administer campaign finance laws that are going to be created. In addition, it also creates a presidential election campaign fund where taxpayers can actually donate money on their tax return to this basically fund for any candidate who's deemed viable to receive public financing. So that would eliminate, ideally, any role of private groups donating money, interest groups donating money, PACs donating money, and it would be providing matching funds of contributions of up to $250 for, again, candidates who meet certain conditions, such as limited spending. It would also provide full public financing for major party candidates in the general election. And keep in mind, this is only going to pertain to the presidential election. There is no such thing as public financing when it comes to congressional or any other type of election. To receive this money, you also have to provide full disclosure and also limited contributions in terms of hard money. We're going to be talking about hard money, which is money given directly to a candidate, versus soft money is any money for an election purpose that is given to anybody or anywhere other than the candidate, him or herself. And if you look on a 1040 form, you'll see that this is where you could include your donation if you want to. And one reason why people don't accept the presidential election campaign fund is because they can far outraise much more money privately than through public donations as through this. So many candidates tend to turn this down. So dealing with money, there was a case in 1976, and while this is not required to know as a fundamental Supreme Court case, it is important that it does provide some structure here as to what is and what is not allowed. And in Buckley v. Vallejo, the Supreme Court is going to rule that mandatory spending limits on one's own campaign is actually a violation of the First Amendment. And basically, if you are a multi-billionaire, you can spend as much money as you want on your own campaign. For example, look at Ross Perot, who spent more than $60 million on his own campaign. And again, this is all about First Amendment rights. So in this case, it's opening up the door saying, if you have the money, you are the candidate, you can spend as much money as you'd like, because this is deemed political speech under the First Amendment. Now, one thing that's going to be coming about is the use of political action committees, known as PACs, which of course are arms of labor unions, corporations, interest groups that are going to set these up. They're going to collect and they're going to donate this money to the candidate as well as to political parties. Now, keep in mind that there are going to be limited contributions set by FECA in 1974, and there's been also ones since 1944 in terms of contribution limits. Now, when you donate to a political action committee, since this is not being given directly to the candidate, it is considered soft money, and there were really no limits until 2002. Again, keep in mind the difference between soft money, any money not going to the candidate, versus hard money, money going directly to the candidate. The one stipulation, along with limits that are going to be eventually established in 2002, is that they cannot be directly coordinating with campaigns, and they cannot directly coordinate with the candidate, him or herself. And one way they sort of get around this is using the media. So this is where political action committees are going to run their own independent ads on television, on the radio, on the internet, and this helps to sort of skirt the FECA Act, or FECA of 1974. Now, there are various types of PACs, and depending on the one that you choose, it's going to determine the requirements, who can form them, as well as the donation limits. In particular, there are connected PACs. Those are corporations and labor unions, which are going to be taking money from their member donations. It does not actually come from their treasuries, but actually people who are part of these corporations, labor unions, are going to be making limited donations. So an example could be Coca-Cola having a PAC, the Koch brothers in terms of their PAC as well. Then you have non-connected PACs, in which there's no sponsoring organization, and they're formed typically around a single issue. A good example of this would be the NRA, which they can solicit funds from the public, and they can make direct donations to the candidate. So they're not formed or by any particular organization. They're typically one single issue. Then you have leadership PACs, which are also non-connected, that can be started by an elected official and raise money from the public. This can be used to cover the cost of travel and expenses for candidates. An example of this would be the leadership fund. So typically somebody who's already in office, typically a leader also in office, maybe the head of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, could start a leadership PAC, and certainly that would be the options that you would have there. And then you have the super PAC, and this is relatively new, and this comes out of a Supreme Court decision, but essentially corporations can make contributions to a committee as long as the committee does not coordinate with the candidate. And the amazing thing here is that there are no limits whatsoever. Good example of this, the Vote Latino Super PAC. Unlimited donations, so there are no caps whatsoever put onto this particular PAC. Now, you might be like, wait, you just said before that there were limits on PACs up until 2002 when the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act was formed. This is sometimes called the McCain-Feingold Act because they were the sponsors here. But in this particular piece of legislation in 2002, it bans the use of soft money, increase the amount of individual contributions to $2,000, and limited issue ads. Basically, it would prohibit PACs and corporations from running ads 30 days before an election and 60 days before a primary. It also mandates that if you see any candidate running an ad, they have to say, I'm so-and-so, and I approve this message. So it's opening up more transparency, also trying to set limits on soft money, and it's going to require that the names and contributions be disclosed as well. So going back to the super PAC, you might be like, wait, you say it's completely unlimited, and that is true because super PACs come out of a Supreme Court decision in which they are going to have the BCRA basically overturned in many aspects. Most of it is going to get gutted, some is going to remain the same, but the big part about the super PAC is that that's going to open up the door, and I'll get into that in a moment. But really the proliferation of PACs is quite enormous. They do have to register with the FEC. They are, of course, monitored. They have to disclose their donors, and certainly PACs are going to donate to candidates who support their issues. Typically, they're going to be giving money to the incumbent, especially in a congressional election, because that incumbent has the best chances of winning. Now, theoretically, PACs do not buy their candidates, but give it to candidates who support them in the first place. That is a very controversial statement there, but nevertheless. But if you look at some of the big spending PACs here, and the percentage given to Republicans, some interest groups and PACs are going to be right on the line, 50-50. But others, depending on whether or not they are supported by the Republican Party, are going to give less or more. So if you look at the United Auto Workers, they gave just 1% to Republicans, whereas the NRA gave 85%, and the National Pro-Life Alliance gave 100% to the Republicans. So it really depends on the platform that you have. Now, very important cases, the big case that you're going to definitely need to know for the AP Gov exam is Citizens United v. the FEC, in which political spending is going to be formed, or is going to be a protected form of speech under the First Amendment. And the ruling basically asserts that the government cannot prohibit corporations or unions from spending money to support or denounce a candidate. So essentially, this is going to be opening up the floodgates to allow unlimited amounts of money into the elections. The only requirement is that corporations and unions and interest groups here cannot directly donate to the campaigns or coordinate with them. And Citizens United is tied in with this other case known as SpeechNow.org versus the FEC. And again, this is Citizens United opens up the door for super PACs to be basically formed. And sometimes super PACs are known as independent expenditure only committees. And again, the whole idea they can raise unlimited sums of money from corporations, unions, and individuals to advocate for or against political candidates. Again, the requirement here is that they cannot directly donate or coordinate with political candidates. So this is a First Amendment case similar to Buckley v. Vallejo. So Citizens United is really the case that is going to be responsible for opening up that First Amendment argument and allowing for ultimately the super PACs to be created. This is a very, very controversial case. And as you see here from the super PACs, very much influential, unlimited political cash. It's certainly been a rallying point of many political candidates. So the question becomes, are campaigns too expensive? Certainly fundraising takes a lot of time. You want to build what's called a war chest, where you have a bank account for campaigning. Keep in mind that incumbents do worse when they spend more money because they need to spend to defeat quality challengers. It's actually better that you just raise just enough money to win and not necessarily more. But where that comes down to how much is enough can sometimes be very difficult to determine. But again, keep in mind that they are always trying to, again, whether you're running for Congress or the presidency, you are trying to build up that war chest to spend. Now, the last slide here, the cost of winning congressional elections. Notice how it has gotten immensely more expensive over time. The average seat is about $1.6 million. This is only going back to 2012. For the Senate, since this is a little bit more high profile of a seat, $10.4 million. So, I mean, you see significant increases here. John Corzine, when he ran for the Senate in New Jersey, he did win. He spent $63 million on his seats. $63 million. Talk about money in elections. There you have it.